We are back to talk about our conversation with Jacksboro Republican David Spiller. He sponsored the tough new state immigration law, SB 4, in the State House, which is now on hold pending U.S. Supreme Court action. Greg, what are you hearing that this high court battle may hinge on?
Oh, Rudy, just a little old thing known as the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Look, I have spoken out consistently about the abject failure of the Biden administration to control entry into our country, as well as the fiscal and national security threats posed by millions of undocumented, unidentifiable immigrants who've been allowed to cross our border and stay here. However, unless this Supreme Court becomes overtly activist, the state of Texas does not have the authority to write its own immigration enforcement laws. And that is exactly what SB 4 amounts to. Now, I'm not saying Texas legislators should throw their hands up in the air and do nothing, but arresting and prosecuting people simply because they don't have permission to be here is an authority that's pretty clearly exclusive to the federal government, regardless of how many times Representative Springer says different.
Stephen, what are you hearing that may be a key point?
Hey, I mean, bouncing off of what Greg is saying is this is going to come down to if the Supreme Court believes that immigration laws is up to the federal government, or if states can intervene in some way. Now, Governor Abbott continues to say that states have a right to protect itself, and that's been his argument for the border barriers and the razor wire. This is a law allowing officers to arrest anyone they suspect illegally crossed. Could be a slippery slope, but we'll have to wait and see if the high court will be political or look at the law.
All right, let's peel this political onion. You know, the U.S. Constitution does not mention immigration. You know, we talk about the Supremacy Clause, but Congress can make its own rules regarding naturalization. Representative Spiller says SB 4 isn't the Arizona law known as Show Me Your Papers, which was struck down in 2021. He argues Texas law diverts a migrant who crosses the Texas border between ports of entry, which is why my word was, you know, diversion. So it's somewhat of a plea deal type situation. Stephen, ACLU calls this deal a dirty word, coercion. What are Democrats in North Texas saying?
I mean, they're agreeing with that, and the way that Texas is trying to get around violating the law or trying to not seem like Arizona with this Show Me Your Papers law is they're saying, okay, if a migrant illegally crosses and an officer arrests them who suspects them of crossing illegally, they can take them to a port of entry. Well, they'll go to a judge and then have the option of going back or being put in jail. So I think that's just the devil's in the details. That's in the wording. But the slippery slope, in my opinion, is the fact that an officer can arrest someone they suspect. Now, they say probable cause, but let's be real. Humans are officers. Humans have different beliefs. And so I think some people could just be getting arrested based on what they look like.
Now, you mentioned it, the law does have probable cause in it, and it specifically prohibits enforcement at schools, churches, healthcare facilities. There is still that real concern that Stephen brought up, racial profiling, that can happen despite what Spiller says. Greg, I'm not sure the Supreme Court will take up that argument, but it sure is going to be part of the trial.
Rudy, I'm certainly no lawyer, but outside of the pundits, I just don't think it will get to the profiling component. Let's just assume in an alternative universe that SB 4 wasn't unconstitutional. I would argue it's completely unpractical for much of the state where law enforcement is overwhelmed just trying to enforce all the criminal statutes already on the books. Here in the state's largest city, we are dealing with the biggest policing scandal so far this century after learning more than 250,000 criminal cases were completely ignored due to lack of manpower at the Houston Police Department. To suggest cops here or in much of Texas have the inclination or time to arrest, transport the undocumented amounts to absolute fiction, if not borderline lunacy, because if they are doing that, why aren't they doing the other part of their job?
All right, we're going to have to end it right there. You can see this interview or any of our past interviews by going to our YouTube pages.
And continue the conversation in our social media platforms.
It is now runoff election season. Tune in next week as we dive into another hot topic and watch some of the highly contested races that are still going on. And be sure to let us know what you think the issue is.